Hey guys, welcome to my channel. This is going to be a two-part quick build video of why and how I went from a stock 100 series to a 4-inch wide 6-inch lift custom long travel. So like most of you with a 100 series, you installed a 2.5-inch, probably an old man MU OME lift. So for me, it rode a little too rough and it didn't have quite the look or amount of lift that I wanted. So there's a few issues that I had to figure out, to say the least, with the design of the suspension of the 100 series. And the number one problem with the 100 series, it is just not designed to be lifted much. So you're going to run into CV angle issues, you're going to run into clearance issues with the knuckles, you're going to run into limitations with control arms. So I'm trying to figure out what is the issue and how do I problem solve this. So I put my rig in the garage and started to look at what are the IFS issues and limitations of this rig. So the main issue would probably be the CV angle issue. So most kits recommend the Diff drop bracket that lowers the diff to reduce the CV angles. So this kit is good for 2 to 2.5 inches of lift, but I wanted around 4 to 6 inches of lift, so just not going to cut it. So that's one thing that I've got to figure out. So 2 of the 3 mounts of the front diff, 2 of them are vertical bushing mounts, and then the third one that mounts back to the subframe, it's a horizontal bushing mount. So I figured that would probably be an easy fix, just using some longer spacers. So that would be able to drop the diff down just enough to fix the CV angle issue, based on how much lift I was going to acquire. So the second issue I found was that because the upper control arm mount, where it mounts to the knuckle, the knuckle bends inward. So when you're near about half to full droop, the knuckle will hit the shock and it won't allow for full articulation. So I decided that moving the knuckle out 2 inches on each side would also solve this. So to move the knuckles out 2 inches opened a whole nother can of worms. So I calculated that to get around 6 inches of lift, I would need to lower the diff and lower the control arm mounts about 3.5 inches. And they need to go out 2 inches on each side. So I designed in CAD the initial front subframe bracket. I would be able to get really accurate results using the CNC plasma cutter, so that would take out some of the measuring variables. So this design had part of the new subframe going above the front diff mount, which later I changed because the diff I found out later that it would have to be removed or lowered every time you needed to take out the subframe brackets. So the new one I changed to actually goes in front of the diff, so it's kind of acts as a skid plate, so it gives it actually more protection, and I think it's actually a lot stronger than the first design I had. So in this, I'm only cutting out the center brace for the subframe, because later on I also found out that the front lower control arm mounts sit about 8 degrees off perpendicular. So to make one piece with compound angles was much harder to build. So here I'm cutting out the center part of the front subframe without the mounting tabs. These are some brackets I cut out and tack welded together, and I'm cutting off the outside part so I will have a offset, since the new control arm bracket mounts inside the factory frame mounts. So it took a little back and forth to get the offsets cut off. So I'm putting a new bushing on the front diff, and so designed a little tool that fits right in and helps push it in without distorting the rubber. So this is the front subframe that I built. A little harder than I thought it was going to be. A lot of just tack welding and trial and error, but I think it came out pretty good, and cut a nice little Toyota logo in the diff skid plate. All right, this is the powder coating oven I decided to build. I figured it'd probably be a lot more durable than painting, so I pretty much just gutted it, made it 12 inches taller, rewired it. Works out perfect. Here's the front subframe coming out of the oven after it cooled off. Looks like a professional did it. Okay, so onto the rear subframe. Much easier than the front. So we're going to use the diff drop bracket that most kits come with and what I already had there to build off of and brace it and strengthen it. And then you're going to lower the one horizontal mount that goes kind of like the J hook that goes into the subframe. You're going to have to lower that to compensate for the whole diff being lowered. But it's much easier to design because you're really just bracing. Alright, so what I'm doing here is that your torsion bar bushing that actually mounts into the frame itself is has a rubber insert in it, and so since we are going to mount the subframe to the frame, you want a static bushing, not a standard like a bushing or rubber bushing. So we're converting this to static. So I'm just burning the rubber with a torch, and then I'm going to lay the center insert, put some washers around it, weld it, just weld a static bushing so the rear subframe can mount to.
Sorry.
Alright, so all I have to do is weld these up and then just press fit them in the frame holes. Thanks for watching build video part 1 on the Land Cruiser Long Travel.